She was glad Daisy had come with her. Sneaking off from Jorah had been a problem in of itself, but luckily at Daisy's insistence, Lyra and Jory had convinced her husband and his uncle to show them the top of the wall. So he had kissed her and left with them, giving her and Daisy a chance to go and visit the maester. When she had found out the man was blind, she had felt such a fool. She should have gone to the maester in White Harbor. But Daisy and the old maester himself reassured her that everything would be all right. Given how the examination was going, in the end his blindness was a comfort. No one had seen this much of her since she married Jorah, and thankfully she would still be able to say that after the maester was done. She had taken her clothes off and had laid down on the cold table, and watched on in surprise as the maester moved around the room with no difficulty at all, even at one point dodging Daisy as she moved in front of him. Now the examination itself was beginning, and she thanked the gods the old man had warmed his hands. "Do you feel any tenderness here, my dear?" he asked as he lifted her breast. "I do, maester, mainly in the morning or when I sleep at night, and sickness. Have you had any?" "I have, though it seems to have passed." "Any problems with food?" Some of it makes me want to vomit." The maester nodded along, and she shivered as his hands felt her stomach and pelvis before he told her she could get dressed. "Congratulations, my dear. You are with child," the maester said. "Are you sure, maester?" she asked as her eyes began to water. I am, I would say, 4 moons to be precise." "And all is well, maester. The babe is healthy?" Daisy asked. "Very well, I would say. I recommend you eat more. My dear, apart from that, don't overstrain yourself, and all will proceed as it should." She quickly dressed, unable to stop the smile which had formed on her face. When she was ready, Daisy came over and embraced her in a warm hug, and both of them laughed at the relief the news brought. "I take it this news pleases you?" the maester asked. "It does, maester, it does. It pleases me very much." The old man smiled, and she and Daisy thanked him before leaving his quarters. They were just in time to see Jorah and the rest of their family leave the lift. She wanted nothing more than to run to her bear and tell him the good news, to tell him the truth. But she wanted it to be just the two of them when she did so. When Jorah came over to her and Daisy, she motioned for him to follow her to their room. Daisy gave her a wink and took her sisters and headed in the other direction. Once they arrived and entered the room, she closed the door after her. "My lord, I've some news," she said softly.
"We!"
"News? About what?" Jorah asked, confused. "I'm with child Jorah," she said, biting her lip. "Truly?" he asked, looking at her hopefully. "Aye, my love. I've just come from the maester. We're going to have a little cub, my bear," Linesi said, and smiled beamingly at the look he was giving her. Jorah grabbed her and held her tight before letting her go with worry on his face. She couldn't help but laugh at the thoughts he was no doubt having over hurting the babe. "It's fine, my love. You can't harm the babe." "Aye, everything is well. You are well?" he asked, and she smiled before throwing her arms around him. "I am, my love, better than well. And you're happy?" she asked. "Aye, more than happy," he said, kissing her, and she felt her heart swell with joy. They stood there holding each other for a few moments, her bear alternating between kissing her and looking at her lovingly, and she realized she had never felt this happy before. Eventually, though, their peace was disturbed in the most embarrassing way when her stomach rumbled and she suddenly thought how hungry she felt. Jorah laughed, and she playfully hit him before he suggested they grab something to eat, but she wished to share the news with the rest of their family and instead had a different idea. "I want to tell your father, Jorah. Tell him and the girls." "Are you sure?" "We can get some food and you can tell them all later if you wish. I'm sure Daisy would understand." "Daisy knows. She was with me when I went to the maester, but no. I want to tell them. I want the world to know about the cub I carry," she said happily. "If you're sure, then that's what we'll do." She practically floated from the room, and had she been younger and in a different place, she had no doubt she'd have skipped to the Lord Commander's office. Such was the happiness she was feeling. When they arrived there, Daisy and her sisters were speaking to their uncle about the new shipping routes and the building work they would be doing on Bear Island, and she could see Jorah's eyes lit up in pride. She knew when he'd given up his seat for Jorah, this was what he'd wanted, to see his home thrive, to see his family thrive, and she looked forward to his reaction to the news they were about to share. "Ah, son, come in. The girls were just telling me more of this deal with the Lannisters. It's hard to believe it was young Snow who suggested it." "Aye, it was. He's a good lad, father. We have some news we'd like to share with everyone." "Say," Jorah said, taking her hand in his. "Vimesi is with child," Jorah said, and she swore the cheers could be heard on Bear Island. "Oh, son, my lady, this is great news. You've made an old man very happy," Jorah said, and whatever hardships she'd faced on this journey were forgotten when she looked the old man in the eye. "Aye, this is great. A babe," Lyra said with a smile while Jory just came and hugged her. "We're not much for feasting here, but by the gods, we'll feast tonight," Jorah said with a booming laugh. Loras found he liked Jon's uncle. The man was funny, and he could see how happy Jon was to be around him. Some of the other men of the Knights' Watch, however, were more dour than any of the Northmen he'd met so far, especially the ones sitting at their table. Up front, Jaime sat with the Lord Commander and Ser Jorah and some of the other commanders of the Watch, though thankfully the man who had insulted Lord Jaime earlier was sitting in the corner with some of his lackeys. While this was the poorest excuse for a feast he'd ever been to, the way the men of the Watch were celebrating made it clear they did not agree. But it was the ale which flowed which seemed to really heighten the spirits of the men, and even the dour man at their table seemed happy about the quantity and quality of it. "Beats the swill we usually get, though. I suppose it'll be gone soon," the man said dourly. "Ed, this is the first good ale you've had in 3 years, and still you complain," Benjen said with a smirk. "Aye. It probably means that I'll be put on latrine digging or something even worse after it, though," Ed replied mournfully. "Don't mind him, lads. Ed's always been a miserable sort," Benjen said, laughing. "I suppose miserable beats dolorous," Ed said, and Benjen laughed at what was clearly a joke. Though Loras didn't understand it. It was few minutes later that a man began playing a harp and singing, and the sound was like someone in pain, which given the looks from the high table wasn't too far from the truth. Loras looked at Jon hopefully, but his friend shook his head. But not only was Loras feeling slightly mischievous, the man playing the harp was really that terrible, so he couldn't help himself and stood up smirking. "Lord Commander, men of the Watch, good bard, forgive me, but my friend wishes to play, good man. May I borrow your harp?" Loras said while Jon shook his head vigorously. "Borrow it. Someone needs to burn it," a voice called from the back to much banging on the tables in agreement. "Shut up, you ungrateful sod. Here you go, lad," the singer said, handing him his harp. The look he was getting from Jon promised payback. But when Ghost licked his friend's hand and he heard him sigh, Loras knew he had him. Jon took the harp and picked a couple of strings before he retuned it. His uncle Benjen looked at him in disbelief, clearly not aware Jon could sing or play. Loras looked to see Jaime and Daisy look down with interest, while Liness and the other girls questioned each other. While Jon didn't play publicly, he had done so for Joy, and Jaime had told him he did so in Old Town, so Loras sat back and waited. When Jon began to play the harp, he could see the men get excited as they recognized the tune. Jon's playing was far better than what they'd been used to, and as he began to sing, it didn't take too long for the men to join in. The Dornishman's wife was as fair as the sun, and her kisses were warmer than spring. But the Dornishman's blade was made of black steel, and his kiss was a terrible thing. The Dornishman's wife would sing as she bathed in a voice that was sweet as a peach, but the Dornishman's blade had a song of its own, and a bite sharp and cold as a leech. As he lay on the ground with the darkness around and the taste of his blood on his tongue, his brothers knelt by him and prayed him a prayer. And he smiled and he laughed and he sung, "Brothers, oh brothers, my days here are done. The Dornishman's taken my life. But what does it matter, for all men must die, and I've tasted the Dornishman's wife." More, more, the voices shouted, and Loris's was one of them. Some called out for the bear and the maiden fair, and others for various other songs, but the next two, Shan sang he knew meant a lot to his friend. The first song was "The Hammer and the Anvil," and some of the Targaryen loyalists enjoyed it immensely. He followed it with Jenny's song, and Loras could swear he saw some tears in the hall. Jon's voice was haunting, and he could see Lord Jaime seemed incredibly moved by hearing it. He wasn't alone. In the corner, the man who'd taunted them earlier was sitting with a strange look on his face, looking at Jon in disbelief. The old maester too seemed overwhelmed at the sound, and when he looked, he saw Lady Linnacy wipe her eyes. When he finished that song, Jon looked ready to hand the harp back, but it was his uncle who asked him to play one more. The song he played, he'd never heard before, but he'd remember it for a very long time. It began slow, the strings of the harp barely being plucked, and then it started to move, just a little faster. It was at that point that Jon began to sing again, his voice soft and low. The whole room quietened down to listen as the words came from his mouth. "These mist-covered mountains are a home now for me, but my home is the lowlands, and always will be. Someday you'll return to your valleys and your farms, and you'll no longer burn to be brothers in arms. Through these fields of destruction, baptisms of fire, I've witnessed your suffering as the battle raged higher, and though they did hurt me so bad, in the fear and alarm, you did not desert me. My brothers in arms, there's so many different worlds, so many different suns, and we have just one world, but we live in different ones. Now the sun's gone to hell, and the moon's riding high." When he was finished, Loras looked around the room. He could see heads bowed and men patting other men on the back. He looked to the high table and saw the Lord Commander had his eyes closed, as did Lord Jaime and Ser Jorah. In the corner, the man who taunted them earlier stood up and began to clap, looking to Jon and nodding, while a few other brothers did the same. Jon handed the harp back to the man from earlier and sat down to pat Ghost on the head, and Loras smiled at him and received one in return. It took a few more minutes for the noise to pick up again, and Benton sat there, his hand on Jon's shoulder, a sad look on his face. Thankfully, it was Dolorous Ed who decided to break the silence. Now we'll have to go back to Ald killing us with his version of singing every night. Ed said, making them laugh. The rest of the night passed quite quickly, and Jon and he left before the night was done, both of them feeling tired and looking forward to a night's sleep in, while not the warmest room, a room at least. Jojen had left much earlier and was already asleep when they arrived. As they got into their beds, Loras looked at Jon in envy when Ghost climbed on the bed beside him, the wolf taking up almost the entire bed, but he was warm. His fur would certainly keep Jon far warmer than his own meager blankets. He got into bed and threw his cloak over the top of the blanket. The cloak had been a lifesaver he'd found when he got it. They really knew how to make them here, he thought as he wrapped up tightly. The fur and material they used not only kept out the cold but seemed to be able to keep you dry also, something he appreciated since it rained in the north a lot. He looked over at Jon as he was about to sleep. His friend looked drained emotionally, physically. It had been a big day for him. "Good night, Jon," he said, not wanting to disturb him more. "Good night, Loras," Jon said, and within moments Loras was asleep. Jon. He woke up early, the first one in the room to do so. Loras was snuggled under his cloak, and Jojen seemed more peaceful and happy than Jon had seen him all trip. Though the boy had told him he didn't much like sleeping in the tents, so perhaps that was the reason for it. Ghost seemed most eager for something, and John looked at him and then walked to the door and opened it, watching as the wolf ran down the stairs. George was on duty outside his door, and Pharaoh stood outside Jamie, both men wrapped up. Well, he nodded to them and went to knock on Jamie's door. "Is he awake?" he asked Pharaoh. "Ah, John, got up about an hour or so ago. He told Arlen they'd be heading out beyond the wall after breaking their fast, so I let Arlen go break his now," Pharaoh answered. John knocked at the door and Jamie opened it and waved him in. He could see he was more nervous than usual, but it was no surprise. He too was feeling the same way, if for a different reason. He sat down at the edge of the bed and watched, trying not to laugh, as his lord looked through various different shirts and coats. "You do realize you could wear a sack and she'd still want to be with you, right?" John said, smirking. "What?" "I said what you wear won't make any difference, Jamie. It's what you say that'll make her mind up for her." I know that. It's just, I've never." "I know, my lord, but I've seen how she looks at you. You'll be fine." "John, what I'm about to say, am I doing the right thing?" "You love her, my lord. You know what the right thing to do is. You always have." Jamie smiled and nodded and ended up picking one of his simper shirts and coats before placing the rest back in the chest. John got up to go wake Loris up so all three of them could break their fast, but before he could, there was a knock at the door. "Yes?" Jamie asked, and Pharaoh walked in a confused look on his face. "My lord, I have a Sir Alistair Thorne here to see you. He's unarmed, my lord," Pharaoh said, surprising them both. "Give me a moment." "Of course, my lord," Pharaoh said, turning to leave the room. "Bye?" Jamie looked to him and John shook his head. Neither of them had any idea why Thorne would wish to see them. The only thing John could remember apart from the incident in the yard with Jamie was last night, after he'd sung. It had been Thorne who was first to clap. He nodded to Jamie and walked to the door and motioned for Thorne to walk in. Pharaoh looked at him, and Ghost came bounding up the stairs and stood by the door, forcing Pharaoh to cross the hall and stand beside George. "It seems your shift has ended, Pharaoh," George said with a snort. John looked to his wolf and turned to go back inside, Ghost making it clear he was here for a reason. When he closed the door and walked to where Thorne was standing looking at Jamie, he was surprised to see the warm expression on the man's face. Though when the man dropped to one knee, that surprise turned to shock. "Your Grace, I apologize for the insults I gave Lord Jamie. I was unaware of his true nature, and now that I see it, I am ashamed of how I acted," Thorne said, and John looked to Jamie, who was stunned. "Sir Alistair," Jamie said, looking to the man, "I knew your father. Your Grace, he was the king we chose, the king we wished to serve. Had I known his son lived, I'd have done whatever I could to make it to you. I am a brother of the Night's Watch, and I swore to take no part in the fight for the crown. But I am your servant while you're here, your Grace, for now and ever," Thorne said, bowing his head. John looked to Jamie, who nodded to him, but he couldn't understand it. How had this man figured it out? Then it hit him. The singing. His father sung. He had messed up. He had messed up badly. He looked to Jamie in panic. "Rise, Sir Alistair. I have a question for you," Jamie said. "My lord," Thorne said as he stood up. "How do you know? I was lucky enough to hear Rhaegar sing, hear him play. I'd not heard any come close until last night. After that it made sense to me, why his grace was your squire, why he was able to do what he can. He is the son of the dragon, my lord. I'd stake my life on it," Alistair said proudly. "It's not your life that worries me, sir," Jamie said, and John finally shook himself from the daze he'd been in. "I would never, my lord, your grace. I would never. Your secret is safe with me, I swear it," Thorne said, looking at John, who nodded. "Does anyone else know?" John asked. "I, Sir Jeremy Riker, a good man and true and loyal to your grace," Thorne said, looking at him. John and Jamie looked to each other. and John was happy to see the relieved look on Jamie's face. If he felt all right with this, then so would he. Though it was the last time he'd sing or play in public until he made his claim. Sir Alistair, I accept your oath. You can actually help my lord and I. There are things I need to do here, places I need to go. Some may not be open to me alone, but should a man of the watch accompany me? John said. It would be an honor, your grace. Either I or Sir Jeremy will be at your service. Very well, sir. I thank you for your service. May I ask, why were you sent here? Myself and Sir Jeremy fought for your father. We were in your grandfather's army, but none fought for Ares. I'm sorry, your grace, Thorn said apologetically. I know of my grandfather all too well, sir, but please, for now, call me John or even Snow, should anyone hear. Of course you're John, Thorn said, smiling. After the rebellion, we were offered the choice, bend the knee or be sent to the watch. We chose the watch, as did others. Would you leave it, sir? The watch, given the chance, would you leave? Thorn stood still for a moment and considered it, before turning to answer. I've been here 10 years, John. I served my time and then some, but I didn't kneel looking for a pardon. I did it because of your father, so I leave it to you, your grace, Thorn said. Thorn said, when I regain my throne, any man who is sentenced here for serving my family will be pardoned, sir, on that you have my promise. John, the watch, it needs these men, Jamie said, shaking his head. Whoa, I know, my lord, the watch needs many things and it shall have them. But these men are here for the crime of standing up to the usurper and nothing else. If I cannot give them justice, then what use am I? Jamie nodded, and Thorn looked at him with a strange look on his face. Sir Alistair, can you arrange somewhere private to meet Sir Jeremy? I can. John, would an hour suffice? Aye, sir, it would, John said, and Thorn turned to leave. Sir Alistair, I thank you for your service to my family. It shall not be forgotten. It was my honor, John, Thorn said, and almost whistled as he left the room. John waited until Thorn had left the room and closed his eyes in frustration. What he'd done was stupid, and had it not been for Thorn's loyalty to his father, the consequences could have been devastating. I messed up. I'm sorry, my lord. John said, sighing as he sat down. It's all right, John. There's nothing we can do about it now. At least it looks like we made some friends here. After what he said to you, I didn't know what to do, my lord. You did the right thing, the man apologized, John. That's more than most have ever done. It's wrong, my lord, what people say of you. They need to know the truth, John. I don't care what people say. I care what you say, what my family say, what Daisy will say. Jamie said, nodding as John got up and walked over to put a hand on his shoulder. You're a hero, my lord. She'll see that I do, John said, and Jamie just shrugged. Go wake Loris and we'll break our fast. John did as he was told, and after struggling to convince Loris to actually get out of bed and waking Jojen up in the process, he waited while both boys dressed and all three left to break their fast, meeting Jamie as they made their way down to the common hall. Ghost ran ahead of them and looked longingly at the tunnel which led beyond the wall before looking back to John, who nodded. The wolf then raced ahead of them, eager no doubt to eat too. When they arrived, they found Jorah and Linnacy sitting with the rest of their family, and they moved to take a seat beside them. The morning conversation was stilted until the Lord Commander brought up Jamie and Daisy traveling beyond the wall, something which clearly surprised both her sisters and Sir Jorah. I ask you not to delay too much out there, Lord Jamie. While it's unlikely the wildings would attack so close to Castle Black, it's not beyond them to do so. Aye, Lord Commander. I just intend to visit the Heart Tree and return. We should be no more than an hour or two, Jamie said in reply. You're going beyond the wall? Lyra said, turning to her sister. Aye, just for a bit. We'll be back soon, Daisy said, looking directly at both her sisters. "Make sure you take your guards with you," Jorah said, and Jaime nodded. "Ghost too," Jon said, and the wolf looked up at Jaime pleadingly. "Fair enough, you can come too." Jaime reached down and rubbed his head. "So you will be more than safe," Daisy said, laughing. After finishing their meal, Jojen went off to speak to Mira and bring her some food, his sister having slept in for some reason. Jon saw Jaime and Daisy make ready for their trip beyond the wall, Jaime telling both he and Loras that he'd ready honor himself. When he saw Alliser, he and Loras walked to him and followed as he led them down beneath the wall to a small room where a tall, dark-haired man with a beard was waiting for them. Alliser looked from Jon to Loras and back to the man, and when Jon nodded, he smiled and spoke. "Your Grace, Sir Jeremy Riker," Alliser said as the man dropped to his knee. "Your Grace," the man said, looking directly into his eyes, a look of recognition on his face. "Rise, sir, and please call me Jon, for now at least," Jon said. And the man rose and nodded. "Your Grace. Your Grace, Jon." "I served you, Father, and it would be my honor to serve you. My sword is yours from now until my death. I thank you, sir, both for your service to my father and to me. Has Sir Alliser told you of my plans regarding those who were sent her for their service?" "Aye, he has, Your Jon. I thank you for it," Jeremy said, smiling now. "Until then, I would like to be able to communicate with you both. I'm sure I can arrange something with my uncle when I speak to him. But I'd like to be kept informed of events here, to see where I can help, where Lord Jaime can help." "Of course, Jon. We would be more than happy to help any way we can," Alliser said. "Well then, sirs, consider yourself for now unofficial representatives of the Crown to the Wall. As soon as I'm able, I'll institute the pardons required for you and those others sentenced here unjustly. Can you provide me with a list when the time comes, sirs?" "Of course, Jon," Jeremy said. "Then again, I thank you both. I would ask that in public we remain on slightly less friendly terms, but I may have need of your service before I leave Castle Black." "You have it, Jon," Jeremy said. He nodded to both men and headed back up towards his room. The meeting had gone well, and Loras beside him had a large grin on his face, which he decided to ignore for now. He met Jorah's and Loras's guards outside the tunnel, and the look on his guard's face was one of annoyance. He'd need to speak with both him and Alirs at some point too, but for now, he could do nothing else. When they reached his room, he walked to the chest and picked it up. "I have to do this part alone, Loras, you understand?" "Aye, Jon. I'll be here or in the yard, should you need me." "Thanks, Loras," Jon said, leaving the room. The walk to the maester's quarters felt far longer than it actually was, the chest he was carrying feeling heavier than it should. Behind him, Jorah walked along with a guard called Lan, which Jon found funny. Naming a man who guarded the rock after the man who tricked his way into taking it was amusing to him, which was more that could be said for the man himself. Lan was one of the few guards who had a problem with Jon's perceived bastardry. He felt it beneath him to guard a bastard. Jon, though, didn't dislike the man or blame him for his prejudices. It was the way of the world, and Lan still did his duty. When he arrived at the maester's quarters, Benjen walked out with a red-faced man whose face was covered in boils. His uncle nodded at him, and Jon was glad he'd agreed to speak to the maester first to arrange the meeting. He had missed his uncle when breaking his fast this morning, and was still looking forward to spending time with him and perhaps learning more about his mother. "He's ready for you, Jon," Benjen said with a warm smile. "Thanks, Uncle. Can we talk later, just you and I?" "Of course. I'll see you later," Benjen said, and gave Jon a friendly pat on the back. Leaving Jorah and Lan behind, Jon walked into the room to see his great-uncle, his first family from his father's side that he would ever meet. He could feel the sweat roll down his back, the clamminess of his hands as they held the chest in front of him. Swallowing dryly, he walked to the man who was sitting by the fire. Aemon Targaryen. The man who should have been king was old, blind and his silver hair had faded to gray. But even from across the room, John could feel the power that lay in his uncle. He wondered if it was his blood reacting to his uncle's. Was it some magic in the Targaryen blood which allowed them to recognize each other? He looked carefully to see if Aemon was showing any of the same signs, only to find he was not. Disappointed as he was, he coughed, and the maester laughed loudly. "I could hear your footsteps from across the room. Young man, coughing is unnecessary." "My apologies, maester. I did not think," Jon said. The curse of the young Jon Snow. When you get to my age, the only thing you can do with any great success is to think, Aemon said, laughing. "Come sit, Jon," Brother Benjen said. "You have something of great import to discuss." Jon placed the chest on the floor beside the seat and sat down. He looked to his uncle's face and closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He got ready to reveal the truth. "Maester, what do you know of me? I know you're Benjen's nephew, Lord Stark's natural son. I know you've accomplished quite a lot for a boy of your age. I've heard tale of fine ships and wind wheels, plus something about ice which I don't understand." Aemon sniggered at the end.
"Oh."
"Most of what you know, Maester, is not the full truth. Lord Stark isn't my father. He's my uncle. My father. Jon said, his voice breaking. "Are you all right, lad?" Aemon asked. "I'm sorry, Maester. My father was Rhaegar Targaryen. My mother, Lyanna Stark," Jon said. And the old Maester gasped. "It can't be the babe. You lived," Aemon said as he reached out his hand, which Jon took. You knew of me?" Jon said, realizing what Aemon had just said. "Your father wrote me often." "Jon? Is it Jon?" Aemon asked. "Jaehaerys, Maester." "I was named Jaehaerys. Jaehaerys. He named for your grandfather and for the conciliator, a good name for a king." Aemon said, smiling broadly before reaching forward to touch Jon's face. "May I?" "Of course, Maester." Jon felt the old man's hands as he moved them over his face. He could feel the fingers trembling when he reached his cheekbones and his nose, and when he moved them away, the Maester began to cry. "Long have I wished to greet my kin. I thought my penance was to die the last of my line alone and broken at the edge of the world," Aemon said as the tears fell. "Maester," Jon said, reaching out to wipe the old man's eyes. "Uncle, please call me Uncle, Uncle," Jon said, and the smile he got in return was true and honest. "I heard you travel with a Lannister. How is this so? You are safe, aren't you, Jaehaerys? Please tell me you are safe," Aemon asked worriedly. "I am Uncle. Lord Jaime is a good man. What he did to my grandfather, it had to be done. What he had planned. Uncle, had it been allowed, our name would go down in history, far more hated than any other," Jon said, and Aemon nodded. "I heard tell of Aerys. If you say Jaime is a good man, I shall accept it, nephew. Uncle, there is much we need to discuss, much we need to talk about, and even were it not so, I would like to spend time with you if you allow." Allow, nephew, I insist," Aemon said, and they both laughed. "Uncle, there's something I need your help on, something I think only you can help me with. Whatever I can do, nephew, you only need ask it of me." Jon reached down and opened the chest, taking the egg out. It once again pained him to do so. The voice was louder this time, and the image of ice being melted even more clear. He reached to his uncle and took his hand and held it before bringing it close to the egg. "Uncle, don't be alarmed." "Tell!" "As you say, nephew," Aemon said as his hand touched the egg. Jon saw the expression on Aemon's face change from confused to worried, to one best described as wonder. The smile that hit his uncle's face then was the largest he'd ever seen. The man was positively glowing in happiness. "Uncle, he was right. Your father was right, it's true," Eamon said, almost giddy with excitement. "What, uncle? What was he right about? What's true?" "You, Jaehaerys. You are the song of ice and fire, the prince who was promised," Eamon said happily. She was relieved that her sisters got the message. That Jorah, thanks to Lanesi, didn't offer to come with them. It was bad enough the guards, both Mormon and Lannister, and the Black brothers would be accompanying them. Had there been family too? Then she knew that whatever Jaime planned to tell her would be put off yet again, and she was eager, though very anxious about whatever it would be. Almost as soon as the gate opened and they were free to ride out, Ghost took off the white wolf, practically invisible against the white snow as he raced ahead of them. "So much for Ghost's protection," Daisy said, getting a laugh from some of the men but not from Jaime, who rode with a serious expression. She thought about trying to lighten the mood, but instead felt it would be pointless. Whatever Jaime had to tell her was clearly playing on his mind, and nothing anyone could say to him would make him feel lighter until he spoke. It didn't take them long to reach the clearing, and the weirwood in front of them was huge, far larger than even the one at Winterfell. She smiled when she saw a Ghost laying beneath it. Perhaps the White Wolf too had come to reveal something in front of the old gods. Though when she got closer to the wolf, she wondered if he was feeling all right. It was rare, apart from when he slept, to see Ghost so still. The wolf actually looked sad, and she looked to Jaime, who had a worried expression on his face. After telling the guards to wait at the edge of the glade, warning them that perhaps the wolf wasn't going to be friendly, which did at least have the effect of making the men stay back, they rode onward. "Ghost to me," Jaime said as he jumped off his horse when they arrived at the tree. The white wolf jumped up and walked over to lick Jaime's hand, and though he still bore a sad expression, just seeing him move around made her feel better. She dismounted and tied her horse off. Walking towards Jaime, she inwardly grimaced at his expression. If Ghost looked sad, then Jaime looked even more so. It scared her a little, worried her that perhaps this talk wasn't going to be one she enjoyed. Though when Jaime saw her face, he smiled, and it was a full one, which brought her some relief. "I do not know how this works," Jaime said, looking to the tree. "It's a tree, Jaime. Standing there, is it working?" She jigged, getting a laugh in return. "You know what I mean, Daisy, the oath. How does it work?" Jaime asked, and she looked at him before dropping to her knees in front of the heart tree. "I swear that whatever truth I'm told today, I shall hold with me until I die. I shall tell no one unless you allow it of me. I swear it by the old gods. May they strike me down should I break this oath." Jaime looked at her when she stood up, and she smiled. The best thing about her faith was the simplicity of it. Just you and your gods, no need for interpretation and fancy words. Just say what you mean and the gods listen. She nodded at him, and he took a breath, closing his eyes for a moment before speaking. "All my life, all I ever really wanted was to serve a good king, a true king, a king who cared for the people, a king who'd leave the world better than he found it. Aerys wasn't that king, neither was Robert. And so I gave up. I figured that king didn't exist, but in my dreams, and I gave up, until I reached Winterfell. You asked me why I took Jon as my squire, and I told you the truth. Just not all of it. I took Jon as my squire because Jon is the king I was born to serve," Jaime said, and looked to her. Daisy shook her head. Had she heard him right? Jon was a king. No, she must have misheard. It couldn't be. Jon was Ned Stark's bastard son, wasn't he? I don't understand. What do you know of how the rebellion started, Daisy? I know Rhaegar kidnapped Lyanna Stark. I know he... Wait. Jon is Rhaegar's son? Lyanna's son? You want to put a child born of rape on the throne? She sat aghast as the truth of it hit her. Lyanna wasn't raped, nor was she kidnapped. She and Rhaegar were in love. They married in front of the old gods and the new, Jon is trueborn and the rightful king. Daisy felt her chest constrict. She walked over to the heart tree and sat down, her back leaning against it. Ghost ran over to her, and she felt her hand rubbing his fur. Could it be? She remembered speaking to her mother once about Lyanna Stark. It was just after her sister was born, and she named her after the she-wolf. She'll be a fierce she-bear, just like the she-wolf she's named for, Mage said. Do you think that's a good thing, Mother, naming her after Lyanna? Daisy asked. Lyanna was the fiercest girl I ever knew. There's no better name than hers for my little she-bear, Maege said as she rubbed a finger softly on her sister's brow. She wasn't fierce enough, though, Mother. Has she been then? Who knows? Daisy said bitterly. I know what I know, daughter, and I know that no man could ever make the she-wolf his. Without her approval, she was far too fierce to be anything other than free, Maege said softly. Did she know? Did my mother know? Or at least suspect there was more to the story? She knew her mother hated King Robert. With a passion, tales were told of her spitting on the floor during a feast in his name. But this could she have known of this? She needed to speak to her mother as soon as she returned to Bear Island. Are you all right? Jaime asked. Are you fucking kidding? She said, laughing. You just told me the bastard of Winterfell is the rightful king. That Lyanna Stark, far from being kidnapped, was actually married to Rhaegar Targaryen. And if I'm right, you've just admitted you intend to help him regain his throne. Or am I mistaken? He is the rightful king, Jaime said. Robert is a drunken whoremonger who's running the realm as if it's his personal pleasure fund. Between he and Jon Arryn, they've destroyed this kingdom, Jaime said bitingly. Your sister is queen. Her children are next in line. You'd depose your own kin? She asked. For the right king, yes. Do you think Jon would make a good king? That's not the point. That's the whole fucking point. Jaime said, raising his voice. She watched as he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. You know, when I was named to the King's Guard, it was the proudest day of my life. Being a part of the same order as Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, the White Bull and Barristan the Bold, Oswell Went, Prince Lewin and Jonathan Darry, all good men, all of us in service of one of the worst kings in history. Yet for all Aerys' faults, for all his madness, the realm didn't suffer under him. People actually thrived. Despite everything, he still cared until the madness grew too strong in him. Robert, though, he never cared. But the poor suffer as long as he has his wine, and his whores as long as he can feast and throw a tourney. You think Joffrey would be any better? You think my sister would? They are still you kin, Jaime. Jaime, you want to know what my kin is like? Do you remember the tourney of Lannisport? My sister tried to seduce me during that tourney. I came to my room one night to find her naked in my bed, Jaime said, and Daisy gasped. When I threw her from my room, do you know what she did? No, she said, shaking her head. She tried to have Jon killed. She actually sent a man to poison a 6-named day-old child, my cousin Joy. You've seen her, right? Daisy said while picturing the little blonde girl and trying to wrap her head around what Jaime was saying. Gar! Had Jon not realized something was wrong with the drink, she'd have taken some too. Jon survived. She would not have. That's my sister. That's the kind of woman who would have the throne. Jaime, I don't know what to say. Say you'll support me. Say you'll stand by me. Say you'll marry me. Jaime said, his voice pleading. Marry, she said softly, her breath catching. I love you, Daisy. I think ever since I saw you, from that moment I've wanted you to be my wife. I thought it was something I couldn't have, so I tried not to act. I tried to keep my distance. Why? Why couldn't you? I swore an oath. I'm a Kingsguard, Daisy. I swore an oath to my king, Jaime said. So what changed your mind then? She asked, not sure she understood. Not what, who. John did, that night in White Harbor. He basically forced me to admit how I felt. Then, do you know what he said when I told him about my Kingsguard oaths? Jamie said, smiling softly. No, what? He said they were shit oaths. Jamie said, and Daisy couldn't help but laugh. He's right, she said softly. We. I know, Daisy eased. You've seen him. He's the king we need. It's my duty, my honor, to help put him where he belongs. But I want you with me, by my side. Jamie, I don't know. I love you too, but everything, it's so much, she said, her voice quivering as she shook her head. I understand that. I love you, but I have to do this. Daisy stood up, but as she did, Ghost pushed against her. She looked down, annoyed at the wolf, and he looked at the tree and pushed against her again. What? What did the wolf want? She looked at him when he pushed her again and then walked from her to Jamie and pushed him too. No, he couldn't be, she thought as she looked at Jamie's confused face. Ghost was herding them both to the tree. The damn wolf was trying to get them to say their vows. She couldn't believe it, so she began to laugh loudly. What's going on? Jamie asked as he was pushed yet again in front of the tree. Yes, Daisy said. What? Yes, I'll marry you, Daisy said as she threw her arms around him and kissed him. John. The hours he spent with his uncle were enlightening. They spoke of the letters his father had wrote, and Eamon had gone to a small desk and retrieved them to hand them over to him. The handwriting was smooth, and as he looked through them, he couldn't wait for the chance to read them properly. The chance to get to know his father from his own hand, something he never imagined he'd get. His uncle told him he had some other items for him too, but now was not the time to give them to him as they needed to be retrieved first. When they discussed the egg, Eamon told him his own knowledge was limited, but in the library there were books and scrolls that could help. It was when they began to speak of the other things, though, where his uncle's knowledge was invaluable, warging and dragon dreams being something he had much more knowledge of. You can warg into your wolf, nephew? Aye, uncle. Where is he now? Eamon asked, so John closed his eyes. It didn't take him long to find himself at the weirwood and see Jamie and Daisy. When he saw them kissing, he immediately warged from his wolf. He wouldn't intrude on their privacy, though he was glad to see both so happy. He's at the weirwood in the glade a few miles from here with Lord Jamie and Lady Daisy. Describe the tree to me? It's larger than the one in Winterfell, almost twice the size of the first platform the lift stops at here. The face carved into it is angry, and around it, now the tree grows until you reach the edge of the glade, John said, and Eamon nodded. Excellent. I've met one or two wargs before, nephew, but none who could do so that quickly. It's a powerful gift you have, but with great power comes great responsibility. Use it well. I will, uncle. Now tell me more about these dreams. John told him of the dreams of the ships, of some of the others. When he got to the ones of his family, of Rainey's, he heard his uncle gasp. When he told him of the things he'd been hearing since he arrived at the wall, the mentions of fire and ice, the melting of the ice on the egg. His uncle sat silently for a while. I think we should do it, J. Harry's. Do what, uncle? The egg. We should melt some of the ice over it. Why? What do you know of Danis, the dreamer? I know she dreamt of the doom, and it was her dreams which made Aenar leave Valyria. John said, and Eamon smiled. Eamon! I am pleased to see you have been taught of our history, nephew. But yes, Danis did dream of the doom. But that was not all she dreamt over the years. She also had other dreams, and though they were lesser, they were still beneficial to our house. I wasn't aware there were more, uncle. Few are. She wrote them down in a book. Signs and Portents, a book thought long lost, but one which remains still intact to this day. It does? Where? Dragonstone. In the caves there is a family vault, Only those with the blood can enter. One day you shall go there, Aemon said excitedly. Uncle, the vision I saw. The ice, it came from the tunnel, from where the gate is. Then you must go there, nephew. I shall await your return. Jon didn't wait a moment longer. He quickly got up and headed from the room, the egg left behind in the chest with his uncle. He hurriedly made his way down the stairs and rushed to the entrance of the tunnel. He got there just in time to see Jaime arrive back. He smiled at him and was happy to see beaming smiles on the faces of both Jaime and Daisy. It had gone well, and he felt happy for his lord that it had. As he watched them pass and move to go into the tunnel, Jaime looked at him inquisitively, but he just nodded and mouthed, "Speak later to him." Ghost arrived barely a moment later, his wolf almost knocking him over in the greeting. He looked quickly around the yard and didn't see Loras or anyone else, so he turned to walk into the tunnel only for Sir Jeremy to join him. He nodded to the man and they walked into the tunnel with his guards following behind. When he reached the part of the tunnel where he had his vision, he pulled out his sword only to find he couldn't reach the top. "Sir Jeremy, this may sound odd, but could you boost me up?" Jon asked. "Of course, Jon," the knight said, and though his expression was wary, he did as he was asked. Jon used his sword to cut as much of a section of ice as he could, catching it as it fell. The lump was perhaps a foot long and wide, thought not quite square. When Sir Jeremy let him down, he wrapped it in his cloak and headed back to his uncle's quarters. "Thank you, Sir Jeremy. You've been most helpful," Jon said as he bid the man farewell and rushed back up the steps to Aemon's rooms. He was thankful when he got there that the maester was still alone, placing the ice on the small table. Jon opened the chest and took the egg out. The fire was already lighting, so he cleared some space and dropped the egg into it, moving back to avoid the sparks, its fall disturbed. He looked around and found 2 pokers and dug them into each end of the ice, handing one to his uncle. They lifted the ice until it was over the egg. It didn't take long for the ice to begin to melt, and Jon watched on in awe as the colors of the fire began to change: gold, orange, blue, red, until finally there was nothing but white. The light burned brightly, and he was glad his uncle couldn't see it, as had he not already been blind. Then he'd have feared for his eyesight if he could. As for his own, it was strange it didn't affect him at all. Instead, it welcomed him, embraced him, enveloped him. He was moving through the air faster than he ever thought possible. Over rivers, mountains, seas, over castles and large walled cities. He passed over a land covered in shadow, over a land covered in smoke, over a great grass sea and a wilderness of nothing but ice. Finally, he saw a glimmer of green in the distance. He saw a tree and a pool and 2 figures sitting there, a girl and a woman sitting close by, and he could tell immediately who the girl was, and so he called out with all he had. He shouted out her name, Rhaenys. He shouted, and as he felt her fingers wrap around his own, he knew what it felt like to have a family.